Hey there.
Hey,
How's it going?
great. How are you, Dave?
I'm doing just fine. Nice to see you.
You too. I'm Eric Anderson from Awards Watch,
Hey.
and today I'm talking with TCM host and resident Oscar expert Dave Karger. Hello, Dave.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you, Eric.
So I'm pretty thrilled to talk to you. I've followed your career from Entertainment Weekly to Fandango to TCM, and I think you're fantastic.
Thank you so much. That's very nice of you.
I want to start at the beginning with you. I want to know what or who turned you into a fan of the Oscars. What is your Oscar origin story?
I remember, I think I was 11 or 12, and I somehow found myself watching the Academy Awards. And it was the year that The Times of Harvey Milk won for Best Documentary. And I think it was the same year that Hein S. Noor won for Best Supporting Actor for The Killing Fields. Don't ask me why, but those are the two awards that I remember seeing. Hadn't seen either movie, didn't know what either movie was, didn't know who Harvey Milk was. I was 11. But I remember being like, this is cool. What is this? This is like, it's so exciting. They're having this wonderful moment where they're walking up on stage and getting an award. And at that time, I liked movies and I liked TV and I really liked music. That was my real love. But there was something about that night. That was the first time I kind of found myself watching the Academy Awards and being interested in it. So then every year from that point on, I started paying more attention to it. So that was then through high school. And then when I started Entertainment Weekly, I started in 1995. They didn't really have that many people writing about the awards. And I think it was clear that I was very interested in it. And I remember it was 1996. And it was the year that Jerry Maguire was the only studio movie that was nominated, because it was English Patient and Secrets and Lies and Shine and Fargo. And the people at Entertainment Weekly came to me and they said, would you write a little article about how this has happened, that all these kind of independent films have gotten nominated? And I was an assistant at the magazine. I was answering phones, trying to work my way up. And I said, sure. So I kind of started writing about the Oscars, and then that really became my main beat, to the point where when EW.com became more of a priority for them, they gave me my own blog called Oscar Watch, which I wrote, on a very regular basis and really enjoyed doing. And that's led to crazy things like, going on the Today Show for the last 22 years, the morning of the Oscar nominations, or even hosting the red carpet show on ABC once a couple of years ago, or doing the E! Channel. I mean, some of the stuff I've gotten to do is really insane for a little kid who happened upon the Oscars at, age 11.
See, I love that. That's the story that I wanted. That's what I was hoping for. And it sort of feels like that almost is the case most of the time. It's just like, I was a kid from here. I mean, your trajectory is the same as, an actor or an actress, in a small town who just wants to hit it big. I love that.
Right. And believe me, I tried that. I mean, not seriously, but I did acting, when I was in school, and I was horrendous. So I'm way too self-conscious to be an actor. That's one of the reasons I love my job so much, is maybe you're the same way, because I know I could never do what great actors do. I'm so in awe of what they can do. And I think what I am able to do is, host things and present things in a way that feels kind of seamless, but I'm way too self-aware and self-conscious to ever be a good actor.
I think I'm the same way. I dabbled a little bit too, and then realized, this is going to be too, I'll get fired too quickly. This isn't going to work. And sort of became a those that cannot do teach moment.
Right. And I'm fine with that.
Me too. Mm-hmm. So as TCM's resident Oscar expert, you're going to be hosting, once again, TCM's 31 Days of Oscar, which starts March 1st, one of my favorite things every year. Sure. And I like to consider myself an Oscar completionist, but nothing will prove me wrong quicker than looking at the lineup for 31 Days of Oscar. Do you have like blind spots that you'll be able to see for the first time this year?
Yeah, I need to go through, and that's a great question. I haven't done that yet and gone through to see like what are some ones that I haven't seen yet. Because what people should know, normally when we do 31 Days of Oscar, we do it every year, whatever month the Oscars are. Normally when we do it, it's movies that have either been nominated for or have won Oscars. This year, for the first time, we're only doing Oscar-winning movies. So if you want to be an Oscar winner completionist, that like this is your time to do it. And they've structured it in a really cool way. As you probably know, each day of the week is a different decade of Oscar-winning movies. So every Monday, it's movies from the first decade of the Oscars, the late 20s and the 30s. Tuesday is the 40s, Wednesday is the 50s, Thursdays the 60s, Fridays the 70s. And then on the weekend nights, we do a handful of 80s and even more recent movies from the last 30 years. We're even showing The Artist and The Iron Lady. I mean, so that's kind of cool for TCM.
Yeah.
More modern classics. I like when we do that. But it's fun. This 31 Days of Oscar allows us to broaden a little bit as far as time frame. I mean, you don't often see A Fish Called Wanda on TCM, but you will on this month because it's an Oscar winner for Kevin Kline. So I'm always for anytime we can, you know, stretch ourselves a little bit and show a couple things from my lifetime. I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's a great way, obviously, to bring in newer, younger viewers, which, you know, is something that the Oscars struggle with just on their show. So to give that background, I think is pretty great. And I agree with you. I think the way that the lineup is presented this year is amazing. It's fantastic. You can just kind of like, knock these out.
And it's fun because you get to see, in a nutshell, and I'm going to really generalize here, how the Oscar winners have almost evolved a little bit over the decades. You know, at the very beginning, it was these war movies and musicals that were winning. And then in the 40s, you kind of transitioned to more of these message pictures, The Grapes of Wrath and Gentleman's Agreement, and then some issue-oriented things like The Lost Weekend about alcoholism. And then it kind of merges and morphs into the kind of the decade of the epics, you know, the late 50s and the 60s with Ben-Hur and the David Lean movies, Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago. Then you have the star-driven stuff of the 70s and 80s. And then you see in the more recent years, the Academy embrace more of an international feel to some of the movies. And you have The Last Emperor or even Shakespeare in Love, which feels kind of international in a way. So I think that's kind of cool, the fact that it's structured that way. You can see over the years what kind of movies spoke to the Academy and the industry in general.
That is actually a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask next, because I want to obviously talk about Oscar predictions and stuff like that. And I want to know what your methodology is and how it's changed over time, as we just talked about the Oscars changing theirs over time.
Well, when I worked for Entertainment Weekly, so I worked for EW for 17 years, from 1995 to 2012. And as a journalist, a proper journalist at that magazine, particularly from, let's say, 2000 to 2012, when I was really, really focused on the awards, my methodology, if you will, involved speaking to as many Oscar voters as I could, either on the phone or going to parties or going to screenings and really talking to them and trying to get a sense more scientifically of what they were liking and what they might be voting for, because my predictions mattered a lot more back then because they were printed for everyone to see in Entertainment Weekly. And I really wanted to try to be right whenever possible. So I would be studying all of the other awards and things, the Guild prizes that came out, but I would also trying to be talking to as many voters as I could to get a sense of like, oh, well, this movie hasn't really had many nominations yet, but I'm still hearing a lot of voters talking about it, or this performance, you know, so that I could think outside the box and think of someone like a Toni Collette for The Sixth Sense when she wasn't getting a bunch of other nominations, but I was still hearing people talking about her and I was able to predict her, and then she got a nomination. So that kind of thing would happen. But often the other thing that I do, and this sounds really weird, but when I watch a movie, I kind of watch it with one eye that's my own and one eye that's like a sample Oscar voter. I call him like Joe the Sound Guy. And Joe the Sound Guy is a guy who's worked in the industry for a long time. And I try to imagine, okay, what I know what Dave thinks of the movie. What does Joe think about it? And that helps me get an idea of what kind of movies the Academy members might go for. And I think I have an okay, feeling or, telepathy as far as what kind of movie an Academy voter might enjoy when I see it. It seems there's like certain moments or beats or arcs throughout some movies where I'm like, oh, the voters are going to be all over that.
Do you think that with the last few years of a huge increase in voters from like 6,000 to 10,000 in 5 years, that has, I mean, obviously it's changed some. We've had Parasite as a winner. The last 5-6 years of winners have been very different from what we have seen before. Does that get more difficult to do as there are obviously more members?
Yes, and I'm so relieved that I don't really have to do that anymore. I mean, I still predict, but there's not as many eyes on my predictions now. I do it for fun now. I'd go on Gold Derby and do my predictions on there, or the LA Times, I do it for them, but it's really more fun. And I don't feel the pressure that I did when I was at EW. It was like, oh my God, I have to get, 35 out of 40 nomination predictions right. I have to get 20 out of 24 winners right. And it was hard to do. But what makes it also harder to predict, and you know this very well, is that there's so many more international voters now. So you can't just look at, the PGA or the SAG nominations and say, this is going to get nominated. I do think, a movie like Drive My Car, which has been basically nowhere, not in the Critics Awards, is doing very well, but it's been nowhere as far as the, Writers Guild, Producers Guild, Directors Guild, Screen Actors Guild. I don't know. I still think that could get a nomination or two, and either for director or adapted screenplay, or maybe that 10th spot for Best Picture. I'm not sure, but I would say there's 4 or 5 movies fighting for that 10th spot, and that's certainly one of them. And I think if you see that movie get in, that is super indicative. Not that only international voters are going to vote for that movie, American voters are going to vote for it too. But I think that would speak to a lot more of the power of the international voter.
I completely agree, and like the directing branch has benefited from the most international members of any group so far, and that's why we've seen what we've seen there the last few years, which has also been pretty great.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the return to 10 Best Pictures?
I don't like it.
Do you like 5 and that's it?
I do. I mean, listen, I'm saying I'm a purist, and that's why I like 5. A real purist would like 10, because there were 10 back in the origins of the Oscars. But for me, when I was growing up, there were 5, and it just seemed a little bit more special when there's 5. Like BAFTA, there's only 5, and I like that. DGA, there's only 5. I like that. It's the creme de la creme, if you will. And I would even make the argument that, when in these last few years, when there's been 8 or 9 every year, you could look at the 8 or 9 and be like, well, that's what the 5 would have been, if it were 5. And even this year, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that I think there's 6. If there were 5, okay, let's talk about this. If there were 5, what would they have been? Obviously, West Side Story, Power of the Dog, Belfast, maybe King Richard, and then either Licorice Pizza or Dune. I would say maybe Dune, and then Licorice Pizza Paul Thomas Anderson would get DGA over, Ronaldo Marcus Green for King Richard.
Totally. Yeah, we're absolutely on the same wavelength there.
Right. So why have 10? If you kind of know what the 5 would have been, why?
I dig it. I like the idea, and it does give us at least the perception of a wider and more diverse range, but 5 did that too.
I agree. I mean, and then this whole attitude of like having 10 will magically mean that the Avengers gets nominated, or Spider-Man, that's just ridiculous. That's not going to happen. They're just going to nominate 5 more movies that are similar to the ones they already have. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I actually think the Academy has, by and large, really good taste.
By and large, yes, I agree. And that's the funny thing, is that the reason that this happened was because of The Dark Knight, not making it in, and it hasn't changed. So it was an idea that might have seemed like a good idea at the time, but it didn't do what they thought it was going to do.
Maybe it did in the year of Black Panther. I think you can make the argument that Black Panther would not have gotten nominated in a year of 5.
Possibly, yeah, except that it had gotten so many other, and it won. I think it was such a zeitgeist thing versus being just like Spider-Man or Avengers. It was more than making money. So possibly that, but see, that would have been the fun argument and the fun place to have predictions, but here we are. Your other great talent besides being a host is as an interviewer. I just watched the Licorice Pizza conversation yesterday and loved it. Do you still get nervous to do interviews or talk to people?
Mm, in
Or did
some
you ever?
Definitely. Oh gosh, I remember. I remember when I was 22 years old, starting at Entertainment Weekly, and I got my first phone interview assignment. I was as I said, I was an assistant. I was answering telephones, but they would, let you write so that you could try to prove yourself. And I was asked to interview Peter Riegert on the telephone, and I was a basket case. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to talk to this actor, and what am I going to do? And now, and I laugh about it now because that was 27 years ago. But yeah, I mean, certain people make me nervous. Like I've only gotten to interview Warren Beatty a couple of times, and that always made me very nervous just because he's Warren Beatty. Or Harrison Ford makes me nervous each time. But no, by and large, no, because when I'm interviewing these people, they're on their good behavior and they know that they have to deliver a good interview. The thing that makes it difficult sometimes, and this happens more and more now with these kind of award interviews, is when it's 6 or 7 people at the same time. Especially in person, it's just there's only 25 minutes and you really want to make sure that everyone gets the opportunity to speak. So it's more of like a logistical thing than a real serious one-on-one interview. But the fun for me is if you saw the Licorice Pizza one, because I've done 2 of those. If you saw the one with Bradley Cooper and
Yeah.
Cooper Hoffman, right? That was, and Alana Haim and Paul Thomas Anderson and Mark Bridges, the costumer. That was fun because that group hadn't really been together in a format like that at the same time. So for me, that's the fun of it, is to kind of plug myself into the camaraderie of a group of people that have made a great movie together and really like each other a lot. But also, you're very nice to say that about the interviewing. I really do try hard to come up with questions that are different from the ones that they're getting by and large in all the other kind of for your consideration interviews that they do. So to hear Paul Thomas Anderson say, well, that's an interesting question, or that's a good question, I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. That means the world to me, because he's so smart and because he's doing so many of these interviews, that anything I can do to make it a little bit different and more interesting for him and then for the people watching it, that's my job.
Yeah, I don't think there's any greater compliment that an interviewer can get than that statement ever. That's it. Let's talk a little bit about this year's race. We kind of dabbled just a bit. The nominations are just a few days away in what's kind of an already pretty fractured race. One trend this year, and it's been a trend that's happening, feels like more biopics than normal. Like Best Actress could be 4 out of 5 playing real people.
Real people.
Do you think? Why do you think this is trend happening right now?
I've definitely noticed it for the last few years. I'm like always shocked when someone wins a lead acting Oscar for a fictional character. I'm like, what? Frances McDormand actually won for Nomadland? She wasn't playing a real person? Oh my God. You just expect these days that it's Judy Garland, it's Renee Zellweger as Judy, it's Nicole Kidman. I mean, and that's why I think people, if I may say so, prematurely were anointing Kristen Stewart as like the automatic winner because of who she played. I mean, I think she did a fine job in the movie, but when I saw it in Telluride, I turned to my partner and I said, I don't even know if she gets nominated for that. And then all of a sudden there was this groundswell of people saying, oh, she's going to win. And I even got caught up in it. I think in the LA Times, I had her as my #1. I think I let all the chatter kind of influence me. And then a couple of weeks ago before SAG, I took her down and I put Olivia Colman and Nicole Kidman above her. I remember some people even commented on like that. Oh, I wonder why Dave's doing that. And not to like say I'm some special person, but then I was still shocked that she didn't get the SAG nomination. And I think she still could get an Oscar nomination. But I do think by and large, there's this thing of when you play a real person, you're just expected to get nominated. And I think you have to not only play the real person, but do it really, really well in a movie that also feels a little bit more appealing to the voters. I think a lot of voters are going to be turned off by Spencer because of the way that it presents Diana very differently from the kind of angelic figure that we are used to seeing her as. And I think The Crown, Emma Corrin's performance, was able to balance it a little bit more than this movie did. So I think that's one of the things that's hurting the movie's chances. I don't think it's going to really get many nominations, maybe 2. And I think that's why Kristen Stewart is iffy for a nomination.
I think that's fair. I think we've kind of gotten into this almost shorthand where you get this early image of somebody, whether it's Daniel Day-Lewis as Lincoln or Gary Oldman as Churchill, and that's it. Like March the year before, it's done. We can go on to other categories.
Right.
Sometimes, I mean, that happened even with Anne Hathaway, just the mere casting of her as Fantine, that was it. We're like, here's the Oscar-winning role. And I do think we do that to ourselves quite a bit, is we back ourselves into a corner. I definitely did that with Stewart and Spencer, and I backed myself in, and it was like, this is it, number one, that's it. And here we are. And it's
Right.
part of the evolution of the season, where it's not always that way.
Well, and that's what's interesting to look at some of the older Oscar winner movies and performances too, because back in the day, in like the 40s and 50s, particularly in the supporting, I want to go back and count how many Oscar winning performances of that era are people who characters that died. And it's almost laughable now. Like when I am watching a movie that I know won Best Supporting Actress and I haven't seen it before, I'm like, oh, she's going to die. Otherwise, she wouldn't have won the Oscar for it. I mean, it's so there's something that they were doing that kind of thing back then too. I mean, there's just certain things. I think there's an argument that can be made that to a large degree, it's the character that wins the award more as much as the performance. But you do have to deliver a great performance too.
Yeah, agreed. One thing we do know is that there will be not one, but several Oscar hosts this year. I want to know your thoughts on that and who you would like to see be one of those hosts.
I am so on board with Zendaya and Tom Holland. I would love it. Yeah. And it fits in. It's in the Disney ABC family. It's young. It's diverse. They're a real couple. It would be really, really cool. I've also read this idea of Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez. Well, sure. I love all three of them, and they're fun together on Only Murders in the Building. So I'd be up for that too. What are some other ones that I don't know about?
Well, I mean, I know originally way back a few years ago, Dwayne Johnson was reached out to do the Oscars and he couldn't because of his scheduling. And then that went to Kevin Hart and everything that happened there. So I think that could be a comeback. He would be a good captain of a bunch of other sub hosts. I think
Sure.
would be good. I'm also totally with the Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez. And again, also the Disney Hulu family, which we kind of know it has to have that connection.
Has to.
So we're not going to see, a CBS or NBC talk show host on this. That's not how it works.
People are like, oh, Pete Davidson. I'm like, yeah, that has less than zero chance of happening for many reasons.
Yeah, for many reasons, indeed. One last question for the day, because I could talk to you all day. What is one wild or risky prediction that you're going to make for this year's nominations?
It's not that exciting. Well, you know what prediction I'm thinking of making, and I haven't decided yet, is Bradley Cooper for Best Actor. Because there's, as you know, there's 4 blocks for Best Actor: Denzel, Will Smith, Andrew Garfield, Benedict Cumberbatch. Okay, forget it, those are in. Who's that number 5? There's no clear choice. Javier Bardem, maybe. Peter Dinklage, maybe. And then, so that slot is the one major slot, I would argue, along with maybe Drive My Car for adapted screenplay, that is ripe for a surprise. So maybe Bradley Cooper, and maybe Bradley Cooper even gets 2 nominations for Licorice Pizza for supporting and for Nightmare Alley for lead. But I'm not sensing a ton of support for Nightmare Alley, which is why the safer bet is Javier Bardem.
Yeah, I think so.
Is that what you're thinking for Best Actor?
It's the BAFTA nominations, which will already be out, I think, by the time that this comes out, is going to give some of that information, even with the juried votes and how that is. Because Best Actor is a category that is going to see at least one stat fall. And that's the first time nominee, because there has been one for the last 41 years in a row, or if Peter Dinklage, and he's in both of these stats, if Peter Dinklage and Andrew Garfield get nominated, it's the first time in 77 years that two musical lead actor performances have been nominated.
Wow.
So something is going to happen in Best Actor that's going to absolutely destroy stats, and I'm all for that.
So you're saying that in Best Actor in the last 41 years, one of the nominees at least has been a first-time Oscar nominee or a first-time Best Actor nominee?
First-time nominee, period. But in the category of Best Actor, yeah, they've 41 years in a row. So I have stuck with Peter Dinklage for this whole time, but I don't know what I'm going to do at the end. It's going to be tough because, I love my stats. I love them. But, you can't live and die by those because they will fall.
Well, my favorite stat that's going to happen, and you know this very, very well, is that Kenneth Branagh is going to leapfrog George Clooney as the person with the nominations in the most different categories.
Yes, he will.
He's 7.
Yep. That's going to be really wild. That's going to be really fun.
But he's never won an Oscar.
It's, and again, I think a lot of us are looking at Belfast versus Power of the Dog, and that's kind of the prevailing thought. But yeah, I think it's going to be really an interesting race and year for him. So
yes, although I'll just sign off by saying I'm over the hate for Belfast. I'm over it. And I'm sick of going on Twitter and saying reading everyone just hating on Belfast. It's a lovely movie, and I don't understand why there's a group of people that just want to crap all over this movie. If it's not your favorite, okay, but there's nothing objectionable about it. So I'm a little bit bewildered and disappointed in that.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the necessity to have a villain and a hero in your own idea of the race. It can just be 2 or 3 things that are there. It doesn't have to be really anything else. But here we are. Dave, thank you so much for talking with me today. And again, TCM's 31 Days of Oscar begins March 1st. Thanks.
See you soon.
Bye.
All right.